Boo freaking who on Brideprice and its alleged commercialization. I recently read an article that infuriated me so much that I spent the better part of that week with my head buried in academic papers, arming myself with an arsenal guaranteed to leave nothing but rubble in my wake. I hate this war metaphor because there's so much suffering and bloodshed happening in the world right now, and there's nothing funny about the thought of flattening things to rubble. I'm keeping it in only because I can think of nothing else to communicate just how fired up I was, how livid I was. I saw my legs twitching now with the remnant rage coursing through me. Maybe it's also good to take a minute to remind ourselves what things are like for millions of people in Congo, Sudan, Palestine, and many more places, not to mention all the victims of state and structural violence. In the words of Kwame Ture, what we want is liberation. Quote, that's the white man's word, peace. Liberation is our word, end quote. Okay, about that article that infuriated me. Let's go step by step. Title, The 1 million shillings daughter when Brideprice betrays gender equality. What is this title? My God, this tells us everything we need to know going in. The writer's issue is the amount being demanded. The issue is the high price that the woman's father has put on her hand, not the fact that her value is being quantified in monetary terms. This already shows a staggering deficiency in critical thinking. A woman is being exchanged for an amount of money that's being given to her father, and your problem is they have overpriced her, overvalued her. My God. That title also makes it seem like the high valuation is the betrayal of gender equality and not the monetary valuation of the woman in its totality. Dorcas, I hate to tell you, you're off to a terrible start. Terrible. Let's define some terms before we go any further. Marriage payments made to either the bride's or the groom's family can be traced to ancient civilizations like the Egyptians, Mesopotamians, and classical China. Countries in the Middle East, Southeastern Asia, Western Europe, India, and Africa also used marriage payments to establish the validity of a marriage. Scholars classified marriage payments into two categories: bride price or bride wealth, which was paid by the groom's family to the bride's family, and dowry, which was paid by the bride's family to the groom's family. In Kenya, we use dowry because it's a gender-neutral term that's not nearly as charged as bride price. It's that politically correct thing where instead of addressing the issue, you give it a name that makes you feel a little better about it. For our purposes, dowry, bride wealth, and bride price are synonymous. The article also uses Lobola, which is the term used in Southern Africa for bride price. Bride wealth or bride price is a consultative, amicable, and quantifiable summation of goods exchanged between the groom's and bride's families. It is any token of stock, goods, monies, or any other property given or promised in consideration of an intended marriage. What you need to know. Then the good people at Nation.Africa decided to give us a brief overview of what we need to know about the article before jumping in. 1. Modern bride price demands contradict our fight for women's empowerment. 2. What was once a meaningful cultural practice has become a transaction that commodifies women's education and creates barriers to marriage. 3. To truly advance gender equity, we must reimagine bride price as a symbolic gesture rather than a financial burden that prevents young couples from building lives together. Let's take this step by step. Modern bride price demands contradict our fight for women's empowerment. First, I hate the term women empowerment. What is that? What we want is women's liberation. Liberation from all oppression, exploitation, and subjugation. Liberation is our demand. Second, modern bride price demands are what contradict our fight for women's empowerment. Modern bride price demands? Bride price has always been predicated on women's subordination to men. This is not unique to the modern version of the practice. Bride price, in all its versions, and especially in its traditional expression, stands in stark opposition to women's empowerment to gender equality. One of the functions of bride price was to transfer the woman to the man, giving him absolute authority over her and any children she produced from the union. The dowry was given in exchange for the bride, her labor, and her capacity to provide children. Quote, symbolically, the payment of Lobola, bride price, signifies a transfer of rights of the wife and her children to the husband. Quote, men tell them, you must do what I say. I paid Lobola for you. The woman was moving from the absolute authority of her father, because children belonged to their father, to the authority of the husband. The men were trading her. Quote, dowry forms the basis of patriarchal authority. A man had authority over his wife and children only if he had paid dowry. Dowry guaranteed a man ownership, absolute rights over all the children that were born to the woman after the marriage. This is referred to as the patrilineal principle. Quote, this transfer entitled her husband and his family to claim all the children the wife bore, whether or not he was the biological father to those children. Since patrilineal societies considered that all the children born during the marriage belonged to the husband and his family, custody of children at the time of separation or divorce was claimed by the husband as a matter of right. This rule of allocation of the children was referred to as the patrilineal principle. In accordance with the patrilineal principle, the rights of the father and his kin were predominant and absolute. They excluded any rights on the part of the mother's kin. It's not modern dowry practices that stand in contradiction to women's empowerment. The entire practice is at its core anti-women. It subordinates women to men's authority and control. Speaking of women's subordination, did you know that traditionally women were not part of the negotiations? Mothers and brides were not only excluded from these allegedly important unifying negotiations, but mothers got a smaller portion of the bride price, even though we all know women bear the burden of housework and childcare, from conception to bearing the pregnancy to breastfeeding, and even more work after the child is born. And the man not only gets the final say, but majority of the bride price. Quote, furthermore, a bride is considered to belong to the father's clan. As such, the father or his family representatives need to be present for the marriage to be recognized. Quote, another aspect of Lobola which violates the principle of equality is the fact that even in a situation whereby a bride was raised by a single mother where the father had died, at Lobola, some male figure in the paternity line of the bride has to be found and be paid Lobola. The same principle applies in a situation whereby both parents would have died. The Lobola payment goes either to the eldest brother or to the uncles, without any consideration to the sisters or any role which they might have played in the raising of their sibling who's being married. In a nutshell, Lobola seems to have been created to enrich men and to suppress women. Quote, in Zimbabwe, the number of cattle to be delivered by the groom differs from society to society, from family to family, and even within the family depending on the achievement and status of the woman in question. However, whatever the number of cattle demanded by the father of the bride, the mother of the bride is entitled to only one cow, and the rest of the herd, as well as beads, accrue to the bride's father. Bet that wasn't empowering in the least. This idea that it's the modern practice of dowry that's problematic is a deliberate lie we tell ourselves. The entire practice is steeped in patriarchal notions of gender hierarchies that subordinate women and give men all control and authority. The entire practice contradicts women's empowerment, not just modern variations. 2. What was once a meaningful cultural practice has become a transaction that commodifies women's education and creates barriers to marriage. Our practice of looking at the past with rose-colored glasses is back in full bloom. Declinism is the tendency to see the past in an overly positive light and to view the present in an overly negative light, leading us to believe that things are worse than they used to be. Rosy retrospection, commonly known as nostalgia or romanticism, is the tendency to view the past more positively than it actually was. This is what leads us to believe that in the past, dowry payment was a meaningful practice, whereas now people have commodified it. It's why we think our ancestors did things better, valued things and honored things and so on. Dowry was always anchored on gender inequality. It was always about subordinating women and assigning men all authority and control. It always commodified women and everything about it. There are various factors that went into play when determining the number of cows or goats or whatever else the woman's paternal relatives demanded, including how much dowry was paid for the girl's mother, physical attributes like beauty, work ethic, social reputation and respect, the number of daughters in the family. Get this, the fewer the daughters, the higher the bride wealth. Family's wealth or social status, age, level of education, number of children born out of wedlock, economic stability of the groom's family, virginity/purity. The husband paid an extra cow later on if the woman was found to be a virgin. Fertility and reproductive capacity. When there are factors that influence how much dowry is paid in exchange for her hand, whether it's in the form of cows or cold hard cash, the woman has been commodified. Commodification didn't start with factoring in a woman's university education or her high-flying job. It started with factoring in her virginity and reproductive capacity and work ethic. That too was commodification, Dorcas. When people talk about commodification, they're usually not talking about that. Their focus is usually much narrower. The problem they're identifying is the high price tag. This is the matter that concerns Dorcas as well. She talks about her father commodifying his child's education and demanding 1 million shillings because she's a university graduate. Dorcas is worried that these high price tags are getting in the way of young people's dreams of marriage. Young men's dreams of marriage, if we are being honest. We are a society that is preoccupied with men's feelings and needs, and oh yeah, they're lonely. They can't get chicks. And when they do, the girl's fathers charge them big numbers. Oh yeah, our men. Bas kababa. This infuriates me beyond measure. I feel like my head is on fire. I'm literally the inside-out anger guy. We have a system that puts a price on a woman after a man's only delegation negotiates. And when the girl's father comes up with a high number, our problem is his alleged overvaluation of the girl. What on God's previously green earth is this? We have no problem with that entire process, except for the high price that some random povo can't afford. Listen, it's so simple. Not everyone could afford to marry the chief's daughter. If you can't marry the girl whose father is demanding 1 million shillings, keep it moving. I'll be damned if I find myself worrying about some random man's ability to pay the price when there's a girl who's being traded as if in the open market. Not me, Dorcas. If anything, I want those numbers to go even higher. And then I want the girl to share it with her mother and her father gets that one extra cow. Yeah, macho. Are you kidding me? You're suggesting women be valued less. Nah. If we must value women based on market prices, those numbers will only go higher and higher and higher under my watch. Once a meaningful practice. Let's talk about what dowry was really for in the past. Determine for ourselves if it was uncritically meaningful or even valuable. First function of dowry. 1. Validate the marital union and determine validity of divorce. Quote, in the traditions of the Dagaba, marriage is socially recognized as such only when the bride wealth is paid to the girl's family. Payment of the bride price makes the marriage legal. Quote, in the case of Case Viruguru, the court stated that there can be no valid marriage under Kikuyu customary law if, among other things, the vital ceremony of dowry payment has not been performed. Quote, similarly, in TVW 43 and in the Estate of Wakaba, the respective courts stated that in the absence of the payment of dowry as an essential customary right in a customary marriage, there can be no valid customary marriage. Finally, Justice Maraga held in the Estate of Dixon Kihika Kimani, deceased, that there existed no marriage or presumption of marriage in a situation where even though monies were paid, the actual dowry ratio was not paid. This precedent solidified the role paid by dowry payments in the determination of validity of a customary marriage in Kenya. At the dissolution of a customary marriage, there was the return of dowry, particularly when the said divorce was sought by the wife. According to Bernard C. Smith, when a marriage broke down among the Kalenjins, there would be a return of the dowry, which would include not only the original animals used for the dowry, but also any young ones which had been born in the meantime. Similarly, the Kamba customary practice required the return of dowry. Where a court has allowed a petition of divorce and ordered for refund of dowry, the divorce is only complete when the court order for refund of dowry has been complied with. Quote, one man said, even if she runs away, she's still considered my wife. The second function of dowry. Give the man rights over the woman and their offspring. It's the basis of patriarchal authority over women and children, including burying the woman even if she had left him. Quote, men tell them, you must do what I said. I paid Lobola for you. Quote, yes, the children are theirs, and so in exchange, they need to pay my dowry. Quote, significantly, cattle payment is for the prospective groom to secure legal rights over the children of the marriage. Quote, symbolically, the payment of Lobola signifies a transfer of rights of the wife and her children to the husband. Quote, dowry also served to transfer the bride's procreative capacity from her family to that of the husband. This transfer entitled her husband and his family to claim all the children the wife bore, whether or not he was the biological father to those children. Since patrilineal societies considered that all the children born during the marriage belonged to the husband and his family, custody of children at the time of separation or divorce was claimed by the husband as a matter of right. This rule of allocation of the children was referred to as the patrilineal principle. In accordance with the patrilineal principle, the rights of the father and his kin were predominant and absolute. They excluded any rights on the part of the mother's kin. Quote, payment of the bride price makes the marriage legal, thus giving uxorial and genetic rights to the husband and his lineage over the girl. Quote, that it was the price the man paid for the children resulting from the marriage. Quote, one man said, even if she runs away, she's still considered my wife. Quote, during funerals, for example, if a wife dies without the payment of the bride price, the husband's lineage cannot exercise its otherwise absolute rights over the body and funeral unless quick arrangements are made for such a settlement. Further, if a wife divorces the husband and dies unmarried, it is the sole responsibility of the former husband's lineage to bury her and perform the funeral. I didn't intend to do this, but I feel like I must. Because in a lot of ways, this thing sounds very theoretical, or like it gives, the husband absolute rights over the body and like he gets to bury her, all of that. And it's not even, it's 2, maybe 3 years ago. There's a woman who died in Nyanza province, and she was murdered by her husband, like murdered brutally. And so what happened was, my God, it was a terrible story. When it was time to bury her, her father said no. Her father said he could not bury her because bride price had already been paid. And so she now belonged, to the husband's family, even dead. And so it was up to the husband's family to bury her. And because the man owns the land, it was his land, his wife, who wanted obviously to bury her child, could not do it. Because where is she going to bury her kid? She doesn't have land. And so what happened was, while people were raising money for the burial, they had to raise money to buy land for this woman so that she could be able to bury her child herself, right? Because the man said, you can't bury her on my land. Like, she was already married, she's gone. You can't bury. This is a woman who was brutally murdered by her husband. Like, so these things, they sound like just pure theories, right? Until you realize that people hold them very dearly. They hold closely to this tradition. So, it's not just theory. That woman would have been buried by the family of the man who killed her if people hadn't raised money for her mom to be able to bury her. Okay. The third function that dowry used to serve when it was, I guess, a meaningful cultural practice. A token of appreciation to the girl's family and compensation for the loss of her labor. Quote, women generally join the household of their groom at the time of marriage. Bride price is typically considered to be the payment a husband owes to a bride's parent for the right to her labor and reproductive capabilities. Quote, proponents of the view that the payment of bride price is compensation to the girl's family were mostly middle-aged women who believed that when you take a girl away from her parents in marriage, you deny them of her services, labor, since she can no longer work for them on a daily basis as she did before the marriage. Quote, one woman noted that payment of dowry is important. I left my parents and I now help his parents, and I have sired their children. My parents deserve some cows. Quote, more and more parents argue that Lobola is compensation for their daughter's upbringing and education. Quote, increasingly, Lobola is described as payment for women's labor. Men buy or pay for a number of gendered privileges. 4. Functions of dowry. Ensured the couple stayed together, making it difficult to casually leave the union. The euphemism for this is, it ensured the stability of the marriage. Quote, as one woman explained, because if he didn't pay Lobola, it means if you're sick and tired of his rules, you can easily go back home. Quote, this prevented wives from running away. Quote, in her view, once the payment is made, the woman becomes a slave to the man. Sometimes you want to leave, but if you do, it will mean that your parents have to return the payment. And when you know that your parents have already spent the money and it will be difficult for them to refund it, you're compelled to stay with him whether you like it or not. She continued that in her own case, she knew that her bride price had been used to pay for her brother's wife, so divorce was never an option. I never even thought about it. As you know, it's very common these days to hear women tell their husbands during quarrels that if it's your money, I will pay and go. But in my case, I could not and still cannot say that because I do not have that money. Quote, that because of the liability to return dowry upon divorce, it acted as a measure of deterrence to misconduct on the part of the wife. Number 5. Function of dowry. Source of dowry for the girl's brothers when they got married. Quote, in the old days, bride price money could not be used for any other purpose, to buy a cow, sheep, or goat, or used to acquire any material property. When a girl married, her bride price could only be used to pay the bride price of a girl for a male member of the family. It is today that everybody is doing what they want, but that is against tradition. Quote, she knew that her bride price had been used to pay for her brother's wife, so divorce was never an option. Security and insurance. Quote, in the past, Lobola generated expectations of mutual aid and reciprocity, and it provided women with some protection against abuse and neglect. As Mrs. Mbatha explains, when he does finance you, you can go back to your parents because they got something, then they are sympathetic to have you back and help you. If a man abused his wife or failed to care for her, he could be penalized when claiming return of Lobola upon divorce. Number 7, give women the ability to inherit. Quote, when a dowry is not honored, women live in a betwixt situation of being settled neither here nor there. You neither belong to your own family, nor do you belong to your husband's family. Dowry ownership is thus an entrenched, symbolic custom that gives both men's and women's lives meaning, respect, and a sense of belonging. Quote, the widow, however, opined that I had to invite my husband's senior brother to give my people the money. If I do not pay on their behalf, I cannot inherit my husband's land or even marry off my daughters. So, just some background, just in case, this is not coming clear. This woman's husband died before he had completed the dowry payment. And so she got the money and then had to invite her husband's senior brother to give her people the money, because obviously men are the ones who have to do the thing. Otherwise, the marriage would still not be recognized, even though the nigga dead. And she wouldn't inherit. And what? She cannot marry off her daughters. Oh God. Number 8, direct payment for bride's virginity. Hala. Woo, dim, 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 dim. So, quote, ancient bride price was often considered a direct payment for a bride's virginity. Quote, virginity of a bride plays a role in Lobola as it brings an additional cows to the in-laws. Ooh, this is the meaningful, meaningful cultural practice that we are now bastardizing. Okay, let's talk about some borderline positive functions of dowry. We'll just pick up the numbers because, 9, hold on to a tradition that survived colonial brutality. Quote, rural black women persuasively conveyed the richness of the tradition, if only inherited from memory, as a source of identity and connection to a familial world, a world that could not be conquered by the brutality of minority rule. 10, showed that a woman was valued by her people and was a source of respect and dignity. It also showed that the man respects his bride. Quote, many women opposed the abolition of bride price payment because they thought it was a disgrace to marry for free without any bride price being paid to their families. She will be ridiculed by the society as not being of much value in the eyes of her family, she added. Quote, Lobola affirmed women's values. It was a symbol of respect. Quote, in instances when bride price is not asked for, the man's family may doubt the credibility of the girl. Quote, if you don't pay Lobola, you don't respect your wife. But if you do pay Lobola for your wife, you respect her. And then you don't easily say, go away. You understand where this person comes from and then how she's linked to you and then the meaning of her to be in your house with you. So that's why you start to respect the Lobola. You give your wife respect if you pay Lobola. Quote, without access to alternative sources of symbolic capital, African women in South Africa's rural areas cling to Lobola for the respect and dignity it confers and for the relational bonds of interdependence it cultivates among families. Their defense of the practice draws on the same logic invoked in support of individual human rights, the importance of one's dignity. Quote, women, however, held strong defensive opinions, especially after they contributed towards the dowry ownership. One asserted, he has failed to pay the dowry for me. I cannot be buried by the fence as I watch. I am a big woman. I have to respect myself. I cannot stand being laughed at by my own people. When I suggested that I would assist him pay it using my Ndwaye Ngone Moito, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to all the Kambas. When I suggested that I would assist him pay it using my Ndwaye Ngone Moito tan, he welcomed it. He is happy and I am happy we did it. Okay, some background on this one as well, right? I also just learned about this when I was doing this research. Ndwaye Ngone Moito is a Kamba practice and it means if I'm remembering it correctly, it means let's go see my mother. And it's sort of this like a merry-go-round thing. Women come together and they raise money for things, and then like each woman gets the money, and they get to do what they want with it. And so some women pay their dowry using this merry-go-round collection thing, and like it's so, I don't know, like it's I don't even know what to think about it. She says, and this is so sad because it's not just theory, it actually happens. She says, I cannot be buried by the fence as I watch, right? And that's what happens if you're unmarried, to unmarried women, right? They're buried by the fence. And I think it happens to divorced women as well. It's like this thing of showing you disrespect even when you're dead. It's supposed to I suppose it's supposed to serve as a deterrent. Everyone is supposed to see, young girls are supposed to see, ooh, she was buried by the gate, right? By the fence. Like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to do that. So I better find me a nigga, and get married quick. And it's, oh man, like it's so sad. This woman paid, her own dowry so that she would not be shamed like this, having to like be buried by the fence, like, oh shit. Anyway, moving on. In the final function that Dowry performed, is it? I don't know. United the two communities and bound the bride and groom as kinsmen. Quote, the payment was a bond uniting the two families. Quote, in the past, Lobola forged a relational bond among the families. Through the negotiation of Lobola, families are brought together and united. The transfer of Lobola creates a web of affiliations that stretches across generations and urban or rural locales. Quote, in the past, Lobola forged a relational bond among families, and as the older women in the community recall it, celebrated the addition of the woman into the husband's family. Alright, cool. Let's go through a simplified list of the key functions of dowry. 1, unite the two families, communities of families. That's the one everyone just rushes to. Oh, it was supposed to bring people together. 2, establish the validity of the marriage and divorce, should it happen. 3, give the man rights over the woman and any offspring from the marriage, including, let's remember, the right to bury her. 4, evidence that a woman was valued by her family and community. 5, it was supposed to ensure the stability of the marriage, which is to say, make it hard for women to leave. And 6, a token of appreciation to the girl's family and compensation for the loss of her labor. Alright, let's talk about uniting families. Families can come together and engage in activities that don't include receiving money or any other valuable goods in exchange for a woman's hand in marriage. It is not necessary that dowry be exchanged or that financial negotiations be held for families to come together. Let's be serious. 2, legalize the marriage. Pegging the validity of a marriage. Okay, I said that pegging really hard. Okay, I'm sorry. Pegging the validity of a marriage on some monetary exchange between a girl's father and her husband's people undermines women's dignity. Further, requiring women to refund dowry equally undermines women's dignity. The refund of dowry in particular is supposed to be so shameful that no woman would ever do it. That makes it a practice that is in direct contradiction with women's freedom to choose, women's right to give and withdraw consent freely. I'm gonna just take that again. The refund of dowry in particular is supposed to be so shameful that no woman would ever do it. That makes it a practice that is in direct contradiction with women's freedom to choose, women's right to give and withdraw consent freely. Thank you, Aurora, for that one. Next, right over women and children. The fact that the dowry exchange gives the man full rights and authority over the woman and any children from the union is morally repugnant and an affront to all our talk of freedom and equality. In the same way the doctrine of coverture, where a man had absolute ownership over his wife and children, was abolished, dowry needs to go. If dowry reformists insist on keeping it, then the price tag must match the value. How much would you justly pay for rights over a human being and their offspring. I know it's far more than their million shillings Dorcas here is crying over. If this is what they were paying for, no daughter of mine, nor I, would ever be affordable to any man alive. Are you kidding me? What is a million shillings for my life and my children? Don't insult me. Dorcas, please. Next, evidence of woman's value. You know what would make me feel valued? Not having a dollar value placed on me by men who then proceed to exchange things and me. That would make me feel considerably more valued. Also, are we to believe that the patriarchal African tribes were taking time to celebrate women's value and not doing the same for men? I think thou doth protest too much. You're valued and prized male offspring, and now we're supposed to believe you came up with this practice to purely celebrate and appreciate women? When have patriarchal societies ever celebrated women over men? Listen, you can't fool me. No, when I was a child, we used to sing this mean song that we didn't think was mean then. It went like Danganya Tutu Jinga, and it means lie to a stupid child, as in lie to a stupid child and not me. So Dorcas and co, in the words of my much younger self, Danganya Toto Jinga, not me, Dorcas, please. Next, ensure marital stability. Now, this here sounds like something a patriarchal society would do. You create this practice where a man has to pay something before getting the girl. Set it up so that his entire family and community come together to contribute this dowry. Then take it to the girl's family. Give it to her father or uncle or nearest penis relative on her father's side. Make sure the girl knows his whole community contributed to it. Then separate the girl from her family and bring her to this man's community. Make it clear that for her to live, for her to be freed from this union, her family needs to refund all that money. See if she'll leave, no matter how bad things get. Bonus, make it beyond shameful to go back home, much less refund the money, even if your family can afford it or is willing to. Now that's how you get a stable marriage. Drum rolls, please. This is the kind of manipulation I've come to expect from patriarchy. None of that pretense that dowry was a token of appreciation. What was I born yesterday? Shish. Danganya Toto Jinga. Next, token of appreciation. What patriarchal society do you know that rushes to celebrate anything female related when there's an easy male related thing to celebrate right there? Why would they appreciate and celebrate the parents of a girl when we know society prefers all things male? They used to sacrifice double the number of animals as a way of thanking God for sons. Women who gave birth to sons were celebrated. Now suddenly you want to start appreciating girl parents when boy parents are right there? Oh, danganya toto jinga. That appreciation thing is just something we tell ourselves so we feel good and don't despise our ancestors. Despise your male ancestors, man. You do it with your chest. Next, compensation for loss of her labor. The only thing that rings true is compensation for the loss of the woman's labor. Now that checks out. The woman's value is in her labor, reproductive and otherwise, and her parents are losing that. The other people are compensating them for that. The only surprising thing is they're openly valuing women's labor. If there's something patriarchal societies love to do, it's to invalidate women's labor and contributions. The other side of the coin when it comes to compensation is the idea that all efforts and resources spent on a girl are wasted because she's just going to leave and you need to be compensated for wasting your money like that. There's just no winning in patriarchal society. This also sounds like something, that's just theoretical, but the truth is, people do feel like they're wasting money, the money that they spend on girls. I heard somebody say, somebody around my age, and they were like, the problem with giving girls inheritance and doing all of these things, giving girls all of this wealth is they take it somewhere else. They're just going to go with it. And so it's a literal loss on the part of the family to give the girl anything valuable. And I'm just like, okay. Because she's going to leave. And it's part of why some people don't even educate girls. Because it's like, listen, she's going to leave. Why would we just sink money here? She's going to leave. She's going to go. And whatever money she makes, it's going to belong to those people. It's not going to be for us. It's not going to benefit us in any way. So bye-bye. Hiya, Dorcas. Come close. The paying of bride price was never a meaningful cultural practice. It was always steeped in hierarchical ideals that not only excluded women and devalued their contributions as mothers, but also subordinated them in marriages where men, by virtue of paying dowry, had all the authority, all the rights. There's nothing worth saving about an institution structured to make it difficult for women to leave, while shaming them if they ever do and undermining their dignity by forcing them to return the dowry. Nothing about that practice is worth saving or rescuing from the mouths of commercialization in the name of tradition and women empowerment. What women empowerment when the whole activity begins with a bunch of men, especially, in fact, particularly from your father's side, to whom you belong, negotiating with other men about your price in your absence? Burn it all to the ground. Leave nothing behind. Creates barriers to marriage. This is another one that's giving Dorcas sleepless nights. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If the above is what men expect to get in exchange for paying dowry, then it needs to be higher. If people refuse to abolish this abhorrent practice that subordinates women, then jack up the price. Let the price match the value of the commodity, which is a woman and all her offspring. Jack it up. Jack it all the way up. None of you can afford it, friends. 3. To truly advance gender equity, we must reimagine Brideprice as a symbolic gesture rather than a financial burden that prevents young couples from building lives together. Let's talk about this idea of reimagining Brideprice so that young couples can get married. All this being done in the name of gender equity. It's almost laughable. As if feminists are not calling for the abolition of marriage because it's the primary site of the oppression and exploitation of women's labor. Heterosexual relationships are the primary way we reproduce gender hierarchies that subordinate women while giving men all the power. Dorcas, we don't want more marriages. We want less of them until no women are willingly getting into that inherently unequal arrangement. In lieu of getting rid of the entire institution, we should at least settle on the abolition of dowry, a practice steeped in sexism and misogyny. Hey, look at me. Quote, payment for women categorically needs to be removed in totality so that all human beings are treated with dignity on equal basis upon entering into and during the subsistence of marriages. Quote, in any event, even if regulation is to be considered, it does not help as it is aimed at dealing with the commercialization of Lobola, and this does not deal with the inequalities associated with it. Even if Lobola is to revert to its original non-materialistic value of paying it with a hoe, the fact remains that it is a woman who is paid for, and the unwarranted hierarchy would still exist. It is not necessarily the value attached to Lobola payment that threatens gender equality, but it is its substantive nature. In simpler terms, the abolition of Lobola means the curtailing of payments for wives. Regulation means the payment of women in a statutorily controlled manner. Regulation deals with the amount involved, yet abolition removes the payment in totality. It cannot be imagined to solve the unequal status which women are subjected to in a marriage by Lobola through controlling how they are paid, instead of doing away with the issue of payment itself. Dorcas, if you're concerned about gender equity, then what you should be working towards is the abolition of all practices that reinforce the existing gender hierarchy. This conversation has haunted me all week. As we marked International Women's Day under the theme Accelerate Action, I couldn't help but reflect on how certain cultural practices, once meaningful, now contradict our progress towards gender equality. Dorcas says she's been haunted by a conversation where a girl wanted to get married, but her father's demand for bride price got in the way of it. Haunted. Dorcas, haunted. You live in a country with a femicide crisis, and this is what haunts you. Hey, Dorcas. Anyway, when our ancestors established the practice of reverse dowry, I don't know what she calls it that. It served beautiful, practical purposes. It wasn't a price tag on a woman's worth, but a symbol of appreciation to her family. It cemented bonds between families, demonstrated a man's ability to provide, and showed respect for the bride's upbringing. The gifts exchanged, livestock, handcrafted items, or traditional brew, were reasonable tokens within the reach of most young men. But what was our ancestors' ultimate goal? To build stable families and ensure young couples could begin their lives together with community support. The practice succeeded because it was proportionate to people's means and aligned with communal values. Dorcas, neither one of us know what our ancestors were thinking, but given that the people in charge were men, I am not convinced that they had any good intentions where women are concerned. These men who were living in the kind of patriarchal fever dream that would make Andrew Tate ejaculate on command were not designing any practices with a view to appreciating women's anything. I just can't see it, Dorcas. I wish I could bring myself to believe it. I wish I could bring myself to believe it was a beautiful practice, but I can't. No patriarchal society that values male offspring over female offspring would have a practice designed to exclusively appreciate women's families. None. What are you talking about? People who produce girls have failed. The true sign of superiority in reproduction is male offspring. Why would you waste time celebrating the runners-up when the winners are right there? It was supposed to cement bonds? Okay, what is it about paying a woman's parents that cement bonds in a way that paying the men's parents does not? Why is that the direction of the flow of money? There's a million ways to strengthen bonds. The reason the money was going in that direction is because the woman was being traded, exchanged, moved from her father's authority to her husband's authority. It wasn't about cementing bonds. The gifts were a reasonable token within the reach of most men. Okay, say that's true. So what? That system was made by men who wanted every man to get a chance at having their own woman to subjugate. Things have changed now. Men are not entitled to women. We are under no obligation to see to it that all men who wish to marry are able to. Men are not owed women. Another version of this conversation is online discussions about how picky women are, how high their standards are, such that most men can't reach them. And so men are getting rejected. Everyone, oh yeah, they're lonely. Oh yeah, they're lonely and suicidal. Oh yeah, women adjust to expectations. Oh yeah. Men are not entitled to women. If you can't afford it, just face it and keep it moving. You are not owed access to women. You just aren't. Women are under no obligation to lower their standards for men. While in this case, it is her father who has set the high price, I'm not about to argue for the lowering of a woman's valuation. Also, it's important to remember, not everybody could afford to marry the chief's daughter. Okay? Social standing always counted. Some people could not afford to marry the chief's daughter. If you can't afford it, keep it moving, bruh. Keep it moving. The modern reality is this. Both our daughters and sons struggle through university. Both work hard to establish careers in a challenging economy. Both contribute financially to their new households. When parents demand millions in bride price because she is a graduate, they fail to recognize that the 30-year-old man standing before them is also a graduate whose parents made similar sacrifices. I have watched talented young men postpone marriage indefinitely because meeting these financial demands would mean starting married life in crippling debt. Others abandon the institution altogether. And what happens to our daughters who are keen on marriage then? Their partnerships exist in prolonged limbo, or they miss opportunities for companionship with compatible partners. I mean, this is funny. It's so funny. It reminds me, okay, before we just resume normal production, it reminds me of the Kardashians complaining about the modern beauty standard. Just dude, you people set the modern beauty standards, right? And now you're out here complaining. What are we doing? It's the same thing here. So you have men set up this patriarchal system where women are being exchanged in the open market. And then now that people are playing ball and they're we were undervaluing this thing. Tumefanya valuation and it's a higher number. Now they're kumbe yata maybe we shouldn't do that. We don't like it anymore. What do you mean? You set the game. Oh my God. You started this. You set the shit up, right? And now you're crying? Fuck that. Anyway, let's resume. Warrior men. This article seems like it was written purely to say warrior men. They can't even get married now. I really don't care about men and their feelings and the things they're missing out on. I used to, I no longer do. Too much of my time and energy is now expended being concerned about women's well-being and safety. Well-being and safety that is daily threatened by men, particularly men known to them. Home is the most dangerous place for a woman, and partnering with a man immediately increases your chances of homicide. Intimate partner violence is at epidemic levels globally. The statistics do not allow me to concern myself with men's feelings, except to the extent that they become a problem for women. What infuriates me is our persistent compulsion to just rush to men's assistance and defense. At all times, empathy is at work in us, the kind of empathy we never extend to women. People talk about how dowry, when it's commercialized, fosters domestic abuse. As if men do not abuse women they've never bought a Kamwala soda for. Men abuse women because they live in a society that says they can. A society that says men are in charge and women are subordinate. The hierarchical thinking that is represented by dowry is at the heart of all abuse of women, and that thinking must go along with all these things that hold it up. That argument is a literal own goal. It's not the amount of dowry that makes a man feel entitled to disrespect his wife. Any payment he made, no matter how small, would have the same impact. It's not the amount of money that matters, but the ideology behind it, which is the hierarchical view of gender that puts women at the bottom and men at the top. Aye, a man will buy you a drink. How many times have we had this? And a man will buy you a drink and then consider that consent. Like, oh, now you owe him shit. Now you owe him sex. Why are we acting like it's the amount of money that counts? That contributes to domestic violence, domestic abuse. Why are we like this? We know it's not that. A man will buy you fries for like 80 shillings and think it means you owe him sex. Heck, men think women owe them something, even without it spending any money on them, right? You're walking in town, a guy smacks your ass. Like, entitlement to women's bodies, like, without even having to pay anything. So this, whatever we're lying to ourselves, that the amount of money, the commercialization fosters abuse, can we stop it, please? Can we please stop it? This impulse to defend our culture, while understandable, remains misguided. There are cultural practices that we need to abandon. Beating your wife used to be acceptable because you pay dowry and patriarchal shit. Now, more of us don't subscribe to that thinking. Child marriage was acceptable, as was female genital mutilation. And we let those go. There are cultural practices that are repugnant and should be discarded with urgency. Dowry is one of those. Don't try to reform it. Just let it go. All the useful things we imagine it accomplished can be accomplished in other ways. If what we care about is gender equity, or as I would prefer to phrase it, women's liberation, then it's time to let dowry go. Let it go, Dorcas. Put it down and slowly back out of the room. Quote, as a way forward, it is submitted that Lobola must be abolished. According to Shenje Prayton, the abolition of Lobola is one of the most effective ways to achieve equality between men and women in the Zimbabwean society. The abolitionist argument links the practice of Lobola to the unequal power relations between men and women within marriages. As May puts it, one thing is certain, as long as the Lobola system exists as it is, women will never be free and equal members of society because men will not regard them as such. One thing is certain, as long as the Lobola system exists as it is, women will never be free and equal members of society because men will not regard them as such. I really think we need to let go of this idea that our ancestors had shit figured out. Like, we need to stop with that. It feels to me like a refusal to grow up. because not being able to look back on what has been done and be critical about it and see, okay, what worked, what didn't, what was anchored in just principles versus what was just, anchored on inequality and exploitation and oppression and that kind of thing. This refusal to do that is a refusal to grow up. And I think, I hope this doesn't, come off as offensive to religious people in particular. I feel like this is an element of religious upbringing. You don't question, right? Children obey your parents in the Lord. You're supposed to assume, that your parents are right, that they know what they were doing. And, to disobey them is, almost to disobey God, right? This is the first commandment, the promise. Like, it's to disobey God and it's to handicap yourself in a lot of ways. Our ancestors were wrong about a lot of things, right? About a lot of things. And when you consider the fact that most of our societies were patriarchal, if not all, like, I think only American Indian societies are the ones that sound really good to me. When I hear stories about it, I'm like, oh, yeah, like, this sounded good. But like, most societies were just heavily patriarchal in terms of who had the power, who had the authority, who had the control, that kind of thing. And, we have to be able to say this. We have to be able to look at our adults, the adults in our lives, the ancestors, and say, okay, like, y'all were wrong about this. This was an abhorrent thing you used to do, and we're not going to do that. Growing up is being able to look at your parents and say, oh, like, yeah, it was this thing they did that, I don't think it was right. Like, I wouldn't do it. Or, just clear for some people, like, it was abusive, it was neglectful, like, being able to call it what it was, being able to just face the reality of it. This person who you thought had things figured out and who was supposed to take care of you, who was supposed to, show you the world because, like, the other ones will know. It's some shit they didn't know. It's some shit they did wrong. And this refusal to just do that, it's a problem. It's immaturity, and I think it really is linked to religion, right? You're supposed to take things as they are, as you have been told. What you have been told is the truth. And, this is why I really love people who are deconstructing, especially the ones who, sort of deconstruct and remain Christians. Because what it means is, it says that they're mature, right? They're able to look at, the Bible, for example. I can only talk about Christianity because I used to be a Christian. They're able to look at the Bible and say, okay, yeah, I was taught this. I no longer believe it. Like, I refuse to believe it. Like, even if the pastor told me, it doesn't matter who told me, I no longer believe it. I refuse to believe it. Like, the question of hell, right? Enough people who deconstructed just like, yeah, I no longer believe that. I don't think a good God would do that. Transphobia, queer, all kinds of queer phobia. They're just like, I don't think a good God would do that. I really don't think a good, loving God would do that. Would, like, send 2 men or 2 women to hell because they love each other. Like, what? What is that? Like, what are we talking about? Right? And this is the difference between, I think, mature Christians and, like, the completely immature types. Mature Christians are able to, like, decide for themselves what they believe. I had that, the Baha'i religion is like that. Like, you get to decide, you have to investigate for yourself and decide what you're going to believe, right? It's not top-down approaches to things. I feel like, most Christians, they never get there. Where your pastor preaches on Sunday and you're like, yeah, I don't agree with what he said. Like, most people would just shudder at the idea of being able to say that. And I just think it's sad. Because your pastor is just a guy. The ancestors were just guys. Quite literally, like, penis people. In a lot of ways, the ones who were making all of these rules, the ones who had all the control and the authority, it was just men. So this putting them on a pedestal and assuming that whatever practices they set up were meaningful and valuable and, like, good, and we need to uphold them. Like, what are we doing? Can we be serious? Like, it's time it's time for us to grow up, which is weird to say. when you're poor, because when you're poor, it feels like you have never grown up, because, growing up, maturity in capitalist society is in a lot of ways having money and it being financially stable. So, like, it's really funny to, to talk about maturity, but, like, yeah, we need to mature. We need to start making our own decisions. We need to be able to look critically at what the adults in our lives have done and what the ancestors have done and say, okay, yeah, I think this was good, but, like, we need to leave that behind. Yeah, anyway, so I had a good time working on this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope you can't hear the kids in the background. Alright, cool, that's it. Bye. Thanks for stopping by. Until next time, remember who you are. Love life, love people, and stay limited.